Yamaguchi Tsutomu. It is the summer of 1945, and this man Yamaguchi Tsutomu might be the luckiest unlucky person in the world. Yamaguchi was a young ship engineer from Japan and was working in the city of Hiroshima. On the morning of August 6th, as he was heading to work, the sky suddenly lit up. A blinding flash followed by a wave of heat and a massive explosion shook the ground. It was the aftermath of the first atomic bomb ever dropped. Yamaguchi was less than 3 kilometers from the center of the blast. His body was burned, his eardrums burst, and he was thrown into the air. But somehow he survived. Injured and in shock, he spent the night in Hiroshima and then returned to his hometown, Nagasaki. 3 days later, on August 9th, Yamaguchi went to his office to tell his coworkers about the terrible bomb he had just witnessed. As he spoke, another flash filled the sky. This time, it was over Nagasaki. It was the second atomic bomb ever dropped. Once again, Yamaguchi was close enough to feel the blast, and once again, he survived. He was one of the very few people in history to live through both atomic bombings. Yamaguchi carried his scars for the rest of his life, but he also carried a strong message. He believed no one should ever face such weapons again. Later in life, he spoke out for peace and against nuclear war, sharing his story with the world. Yamaguchi Tsutomu passed away in 2010, at the age of 93. John Herbert Hedley. John Herbert Hedley was a British airman during the First World War. He served as an observer in the Royal Flying Corps, flying in open cockpit biplanes high above the battlefields of Europe. In January 1917, Hedley went up on a mission with his pilot. Their aircraft was a fragile machine of wood, fabric, and wires, nothing like the strong planes we know today. The air was freezing, the wind sharp, and danger was everywhere. As they flew, the pilot made a sudden dive. The aircraft tilted forward, and in that moment, Hedley was thrown from his seat. There were no seatbelts in those early planes. He was simply tossed out into the open sky, thousands of feet above the ground. For a few heart-stopping seconds, Hedley was falling. The world must have spun around him, the ground racing closer. Yet by some miracle, as the plane pulled out of its dive, Hedley crashed back onto the tail of the aircraft. His body hit the frame hard, but he managed to grab hold. Against all odds, he climbed back into the plane while still in flight. The pilot steadied the aircraft, and together they made it safely back to base. This was the first known time a person fell from an airplane in combat and lived to tell the tale. John Herbert Hedley became known as the luckiest man in the Royal Flying Corps. His survival was almost impossible, but it showed the courage and resilience of the early airmen. Julian Köpke. Julian Köpke was a 17-year-old girl in 1971. She grew up in Peru, where her parents worked as scientists in the rainforest. That December, she boarded a flight with her mother to visit family for Christmas. The airplane, called Lanza Flight 508, carried more than 90 people. At first, the trip seemed normal. Then the plane flew into a terrible storm. Lightning flashed all around. Suddenly, a bolt struck the aircraft. The plane broke apart in mid-air, almost 2 miles above the ground. Julian was still strapped to her seat when she was thrown out. She fell through the sky, surrounded by pieces of the aircraft. Below her was the endless green of the Amazon rainforest. She hit the trees, which slowed her fall and then crashed into the jungle floor. Incredibly, she survived. Julianne was injured. She had broken bones, a deep cut on her arm, and her eye was swollen shut. But she was alive, the only survivor of the crash. Alone in the rainforest, she remembered what her father had taught her. Rivers lead to people. For 11 days, she struggled through the jungle. She had no supplies, only a little candy she found. She endured insects, hunger, and pain. She followed small streams, walking and sometimes floating in the water. Despite her wounds, she kept moving forward. At last, Julianne found a small hut used by local forest workers. There, she was discovered and taken to safety. Julian Köpke's story is one of survival against impossible odds. From a fall out of the sky to days lost in the Amazon, her courage and knowledge kept her alive. Thanks for watching my first video. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe for more videos like this. And if you have suggestions, please let them know in the comments.